Hi, everyone. This is Pete from IP4AP.com, Warren's silent partner. And we first want to start off by thanking everyone for all the support you've been giving us for our new subscription service. This is a big change for us, and part of that service was being able to provide you with more content on a timely basis and fresh, frequent content. And in an effort to do that, one of the things we wanted to do was present you with some, we'll call on-the-fly videos going over PixInsight. We'll go over some processes along the way, but today we want to try to do an object-oriented video to show you some processing here, and Warren's got something set up for us today, so I'll hand it over to Warren. Warren.
Excellent. Thank you, Pete, and thanks to everybody from me personally as well. Yep, so those of you who have been with us for a while know that I'm all about scripting, carefully writing and editing and producing. So on the fly is maybe not my best, but you'll bear with me, and I'll try to do my best. So we have a PixInsight project loaded here. As you can see, I've got my my master files nested within the project, so I can actually keep them within a project. I've got my trusty chronological icon set that I frequently update and provide to you, and those get nested within a project as well. And anything that we create along the way. You can see some masks here, and if you haven't taken advantage of projects, very powerful. You can load them here from this icon on the project toolbar. You don't want to click on the data folder, but rather on the XOSM file. We have 316669 open right now. Clicking on that would be the key to opening its corresponding data folder that you see here, and you might see that Windows quote there of almost 4 gigabytes. So they are large, but again, the beauty of them is not only can you store all of your working images, your masters, but it literally takes a snapshot of everything you do. So if I move these icons, if I minimize them, whatever the zoom level is, it's going to record all of that and reproduce the project exactly as I put it away when I reopen it.
That's so powerful here, Warren, because of the fact that we often work on things and we can't get it all done in one shot, and it's one of the powers of the program that we can come back and get exactly to where we were, and we see all that history and everything associated with anything we've done. Right. I just want to make note, Warren, too, so we're not going to do any pre-processing with this. These are all files that you've pre-processed, right?
That's right. We'll start with a little post-processing with master files, but we will for sure very soon do a from the ground up pre-processing for those of you who might still have some head scratchers or would just like to see some things laid out and maybe affirmed.
Terrific.
Yeah. So this is kind of, this LRGB is kind of the state that I ended things up with. I did a little bit of tweaking after the fact, but this was actually an APOD that I had, I think, late last year with some data from Star Shadow's remote observatory in Chile. And so how did we get here? How did we get here? That's the big question. So for those of you who have not really gotten much into the wonderful History Explorer, we'll go there. Many of you might know that by clicking on this little box, that's called stick, and that now turns red, which is a little bit of a newer change, and that will then stay open so it won't retract away when I move the cursor. And while this drop down, or in this case drop up menu, actually gives me access to the individual views that would pull up the images themselves, right? Like if I were to click on Blue Master, it will literally pull up the Blue Master. That's not what I want to show you. This drop down or drop up menu within the History Explorer itself gives us access to the history of those particular images. So we'd have to manipulate both if we'd wanted to view an image and also view its history. So this is LRGB right now that we're looking at. And you can see we've got quite a few steps to that. The current state of an image is going to be indicated by the double orange arrow on the left side there. It'll show us the step number of processes that we performed. It shows us what the actual process or script was that we applied to the image. It shows us what mask is in place at the time that it was applied. Notice that this had something called a galaxy mask in place, and notice that the tilde indicates that the inverse of that mask. So there I used an inverted L mask a few steps back at step 26. Tells us the actual time and even the amount of milliseconds or seconds that a process took to process. So again, very powerful. We've gone through this, but I know sometimes some of us just need to see things in real time, and this is as close as some of us can get to being together, right? Having a little fireside chat, if you will. So in addition to skipping back to a previous history state or forward with the orange arrow, by double clicking on the process itself will open that process at those settings. And that's very powerful, not only to review, but to reapply it, or think about it to actually apply it to a clone. Let's say we're not happy where we are at any particular time. Well, we could back up to a state when we were still happy, create a clone of that image, right, easily by just dragging out that view identifier tab, and then applying, let's say, all of these processes, all or any of these processes to the clone, making an adjustment somewhere along the way, or leaving out something that we were unhappy with. So again, very, very powerful, right?
That's got to be one of my favorite options or things that you can do with PixInsight.
Mm-hmm.
So
right.
many times at a point in the image where you say, you know what, I don't really like where I am, and you can go back and then try to find a different path there, but still keep where you're going. Unlike other programs like Photoshop, where we're kind of stuck with the history somewhat.
Right, and as those of you who have been with us for a while, I did detail Photoshop, and I still think it's a terrific program, and it has a lot of couple of bells and whistles for astroimaging as well. But although you had the efficiency of a TIFF or PSD Photoshop document, which stored all of the layers and all of the masks in a very size efficient way, from session to session, as Pete's intimating there, you lost that history. You couldn't actually see what did I do in what sequence. And even for someone with my experience, and I was in it for about 12 years and taught it, I would find it a bit confusing sometimes to try to deal with all of those layers at any one time. I'm just going to reload my chronological icon set, because somehow one of them got dragged over and I was seeing a scroll bar there. So let's see. Typically with monochromatic imaging, you can start with luminance or you can start with chrominance. I tend to mix it up, but I think I more times than not start with chrominance. And so if we go way back to that initial state, we can see that the view identifier tab says image 13, and first thing I did was change the name of the image to RGB. So that was when I first created my chrominance from my master red, green, and blue. And we'll put the auto stretch on. Control A will do that. We've also got it up here at the toolbar. We've also got the boosted auto stretch available here. And if you recall that a control click of either one of those will remove the chain linked equal stretch to the channels, and sometimes we get a better color balance. So you notice there that red bias that we saw previously is now gone. So looking at the STF itself, here's the auto stretch, The boosted auto stretch is accomplished with shift click, but when the chain link is active, all three of those channels will be stretched equally. And when we have a color bias due to light pollution or whatever it might be, that can give us a less than desirable color balance. So again, I see a red bias there, and when I remove that and restretch, a lot of that red bias disappears. So the first thing I did was DBE, dynamic background extraction, right? So we've got DBE, soon to be called DB. Juan's going to change the name to dynamic background and do a little rewriting on it. And we've also got ABE, the automatic background extractor. And as we've talked about in the tutorials, they are different algorithms. They work differently. DBE gives you more dynamic interaction, whereas ABE is basically automatic. But there are times that one or the other may do a better job, and it's never a good idea to say, oh, this is a difficult case, it's, you know, DBE is going to do the better job. You never quite know. I've done a lot of galaxies lately, and so I typically have a good amount of neutral or relatively neutral background sky, and so I like DBE, and I tend to use it more than ABE. One thing I notice about ABE is you'll often get dark circles, artifact around stars and such, almost like holes in the image sometimes too. But again, it can sometimes be exactly what the doctor ordered, and even in very colorful nebulous images where you would think ABE wouldn't do a good job, I've seen it do a terrific job.
Warren, when I use ABE, I seem to get a lot of like dark lanes around galaxies. It's almost, I check out the rejection image to see what the, what the ABE is doing to it, and typically looks like what I would expect, but it tends to give me a lot of dark lanes around the circling around the galaxies and things. So it doesn't even see. Are there cases where ABE or a certain type of image where ABE is more useful?
I remember in our original series there was a sequence where we used it on the Iris Nebula, which had some really awful color gradient in it, and ABE did a tremendous job there. It actually, for me, outdid DBE, and yet again, you would think that would have been a bit more of a too complex a situation for ABE, and yet exactly what the doctor ordered. But I often see what you talk about too, which I mentioned. You'll get a dark negative circle around the halo of a star or around a galaxy, right? And so, yeah, as I say, your mileage may vary. Try different things, but again, don't assume that ABE is not capable of a particular job. You'll notice, and again, we've sort of stressed this in the tutorials as well. I believe less is more, because dynamic background is able to detect gradients, and because gradients are typically large scale and very smooth changing. I like the way Rogelio Bernal Andreu had put it. You don't want a very bumpy, overly complex looking background model. It should be smooth. It should be, and fairly large scaled. And so our feeling has been, and I think Juan would back us up, that unlike using the automatically generated sample generation down here and just doing a gazillion samples, that can more confuse the algorithm than help it. So certainly if you're going to use the automatic sample generation that we've shown and we've talked about, probably no more than 5 samples per row. And again, I like to manually place them, and pretty minimalistically. I will often take the STF and using the manual control here, and in this case I'll have to magnify a little bit. Well, actually, let me take that back. Because they're not linked right now, I'll magnify a little bit so I can get a handle on what's going on. Select the little arrow there for manual control, and then I might do what I call a super stretch on something, just to kind of give me a little bit of edge and see what I'm dealing with, right? You'll notice our old Apogee U9 camera had some terrible column defects, and created a very sophisticated cosmetic correction template for it, which really did a good job, but left, rather than just absolutely dead columns, left a little bit of residual stripes there. But remember that you can aggregate previews. If you've got a bunch of green here and a bunch of red here, as you move down the line with color calibration and stuff, you can aggregate previews. But the first step is here at the background modelization, in this case DBE, and that's how I place my samples. I try to get into corners unless they're really dark and the flat subtraction was less than ideal, and you still have some deep vignetting in the corners. I might avoid a corner. Always want to avoid star halos as much as possible. Don't want to get into any extended galactic halo or extended nebulosity, because that's the real deal, right? We don't want to kill any of that. But even there, the processes can be pretty forgiving, because again, it understands small, medium scale changes versus large scale equals gradient type of things. But this would be pretty typical. I'll often, like I said, go corners. I might go, here, 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 here. Then kind of divide that up, here, 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 here. Then get, kind of halfway in between. And again, just try to avoid any of that good stuff. And when you do generate, invoke that process, always, like we've shown, look at the model. Make sure you're not discarding it. You don't want to have that checked. You want to look at the model, and you want to see, what it looks like. Is it smooth? Is it a large scale gradient? Does it look like the gradient that's in the image itself? And always use subtraction. If you don't have any flats at all, you might consider division if you've got a lot of vignetting. But typically subtraction is going to do those fixes as well as the additive gradients, which is the light pollution and the ambient light that might be in your observatory and such. And again, it's pretty forgiving. If I were to choose a star accidentally, that'll be expressed as a black hole, and it won't be used in the calculation. It knows that's a star, but then again, guess what? I'm wasting a sample, right? Because it's taken up the majority of the image. So if I can, I drag it off of there, or I delete it, and you can delete it with the red X. So how's that feeling there, Pete?
Yeah, good,
yeah.
Great.
Yeah, good. So so that's what we did, and after the fact, we wound up at this at that stage, and at that point, we've got rid of some more of that bias. And background neutralization has always been recommended by Juan, and therefore by us as the next step. I don't often see dramatic changes, but it can help balance the R, G, and B channels. And what you do there, and those of you who have been with us again for a while knows that you can use dynamic background neutralization in a variety of ways. You can use the image itself as reference, but probably better to choose a neutral, again, background sample, name that as the reference image, and go ahead and apply it. It seems to work fine at defaults. What you can do is kind of take your cursor in the readout mode, make sure you've got your pop-up window available, and look at what your RGB values are. Not any stars that might be trapped in there, but the background, and they're reading 0.0002, And you might take that upper limit down a little bit to just above that 0.2 to like 0.3, and that might give you a little bit more accurate result. And so after background neutralization, you should have pretty well aligned red, green, and blue histograms. And then color calibration, which is really powerful, and I think Pete would agree with me, that's one of our favorite things in PixInsight as well. Whereas in the past, none of us really did any kind of calibration. We kind of just studied the histogram and got kind of familiar with what it looked like. And I don't want to show it yet because it's still linear and it won't help us much. And then G2v calibration came along, right, where we took a sun-like G2v class star and used that as the white reference. And you can still do that. You can use a program like Bob Frankie's Excalibrator, and you can choose to actually force a manual white balance, give the factors for RGB right there. But what PixInsight uses as the PI, the P team as we call them, they like what's called a agnostic, a chromatically agnostic view of color calibration. They'd rather look at all of the spectral classes, all the stars that are in the image, and try to determine what those stars represent and do a channel alignment based on that. And the way we do that is typically with structure detection checked. So we've talked a little bit about wavelets and several wavelet-based processes that PixInsight uses, and these are small to large structures in different planes or layers, wavelet layers or planes. And by using those, you can easily isolate these small little round structures, which happen to be stars, analyze them, and make appropriate changes to them. And so in this case, I've left the white reference as just the target image, because it, through wavelets, through structure detection, is only going to use the stars in those images. And if you don't believe me, you can choose to generate an output white reference mask, and when you apply it, you'll be given a mask, and sure enough, you'll see that the stars were the only things that were used in the calculation. And for background reference in this case, I wound up apparently using just the target image itself. And again, if you don't believe me, you can output a background reference mask and you'll see that it's only using the background. Oftentimes though, I use the preview that we had created for background neutralization, and or an aggregated preview of a couple of different areas of the background sky. So either one, and you can try both. And there's a third, beside manual forced white balance and beside structure detection, there's a third method with which Vicente Perez really had come up with, which is very bright, very clever, as he is. And what that does is use appropriate galaxies as the white reference. So picture the scenario. Here we're shooting at 4.5 meters focal length, right? We know that's a lot of focal length. We know that a lot of galaxy areas are very star poor. So let's say we don't have but one or two or no really great stellar references for color reference, right, for a white reference. So what he says is, and I would say these are probably not the best examples to use, and I didn't. But if you have, and he's got, you'll find it, we state it somewhere in the tutorials, I stated in my new book, and it's certainly findable on the PixInsight forum, that there are certain classes of galaxies, typically face on, kind of classic spiral class, not too far away, and he's got a couple of other very exacting criteria there that are a little over my head as far as how many parsecs distance and what their tilt is and all of that stuff. But the bottom line is, what are we saying? We're saying, we need some stars for good white reference, and guess what? An appropriate galaxy is going to have, new blue stars in the outer arms. It's going to have old golden stars at the core. It's going to have some pinkish red H2 knots in it. So hey, you got everything: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet. You've pretty much got the whole spectrum as a color reference, as a white reference. So in that case, we would uncheck structure detection. We would choose that appropriate galaxy itself, a preview around it, as the white reference, and do color calibration that way. And there have been times that I'm not going to go measure how many parsecs a galaxy is or what the tilt is, but I'll try, two different ways. I'll try structure detection. I'll try the galaxy method, and I've even split the difference sometimes. So,
Warren,
yeah.
when you use the galaxy method, would you take preview of that of a portion of that galaxy and then use the region of interest?
Yep, that's exactly what I would do. I would I'm doing Alt N, and I would let's say that I decided this was an appropriate galaxy, and this one's not bad. This one's a real irregular. I wouldn't use it, but in this case, I would try to stay to the spiral, to the outer arms. I wouldn't get too much in the background. I'd try to pretty much center on the nucleus itself, and then that would be my my target reference image there. I could name it there, RGB Preview 01, or conversely, as Pete mentioned, I could choose, I could leave this as it was, and choose region of interest from preview, and go with the RGB Preview 1. Either way, that's going to be the white reference sample image. So that's what I do.
Right.
Yep. So in this case, we color calibrated, and wow, what a difference. So I'm going to Control Z to back up, and I got rid of all that red bias. Looks a little bit greenish bluish to me right now. So let's see where we're at with this. Let's link channels at this point. And now when we've got the channels linked and we put the boosted auto stretch back on, we really got some good color there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And next thing I like to do, and again, this isn't the most complex workflow, but it's a workflow that has really come to work for me, and it's fairly predictable with this data and with galaxies as the subject, and I think that's great to be able to. We talk about, Juan talks about what does he call fast food solutions to processing. He doesn't much like that, and I guess I don't either, but I do want the best result, but I also don't want to work so hard that law of diminishing returns, where I've put in hours of work to get a 5% gain on an image, right? But I'm a strong believer in linear adjustments, and that's one of the beauties of PixInsight, right? I mean, this image, as evidenced by this green line here, is still, and let's remind ourselves, it's still a linear image, right? It hadn't even been stretched yet, and yet we're able to do some very significant repairs, and sometimes not so much enhancements, but repairs before we even take the thing non-linear. And I like to use a phrase where there's some great tools and plugins for Photoshop, but you kind of have to break the image before you can fix it. And with PixInsight, because of the STF, the Screen Transfer Function Auto Stretch, because we get such a nice non-linear view of a linear image, we can fix it before it's broke. So we can get rid of gradients, we can correct for color imbalance before we even do the stretch, right? So let's move on. If Pete doesn't have any thoughts, we'll move on to some linear noise reduction.